The enviable or dubious distinction of being a visual effects designer is that when you do a movie that's 2 years long, if you simply rely on technology that exists when you begin the film to execute the visuals in that movie, the movie will be obsolete long before you're even halfway through production. So what you need to do is you have to go with all of the wildest concepts, simply figure out a way, the best way that you can, to bring that stuff to the screen and assume that you will find the technology to make it work. The difference between this movie, the second movie that we're working on, and the first movie is we went through this process of invention. We had to bring this superhero and this higher persona, we had to empower him. In other words, you had to feel as if you and the audience understood what it was like to be an individual who could swing from the top of a building, land on the sidewalk, and go over and punch out some guy who was lifting some poor old lady's handbag.
You know, on the first Spider-Man, when I first started doing it, the first time I had him jump off the ground, 30 feet in the air to a wall, my first reaction was, this will never work. You have to go into a different world. You have to change your mindset to work with it. But it's hard to get there in the beginning because you're so attached to the physical world and how believable this character can be. And I've always said that we have to make that character incredible, but not unbelievable.
Knees have to bend more, arms have to flex more, muscles become larger. You move in a different way, center of mass moves differently in order to make it believable that this guy jumped off this 100-foot tall building and landed on the ground and walked away. So if you present a character in a comic book sense that does something like that, and you simply use human capabilities, the example would be to have a stuntman jump off a 10-foot high platform onto a pad and then simply take the way he lands, much in the sense that they use motion capture, and apply that to our CGI character, you know right away, you smell something is wrong with it. None of us are familiar with superhero body language. You have to interpret.
One of the challenges of being the producer on this show was you got a script and you did a breakdown, and then you got a new script and you did a new breakdown, and so on and so on. A lot of plot development points changed, dialogue changed a lot, but the basic heart of the story was always in the script, the early script that I got. Certainly
all the action sequences, it's described in a script, but it's never played out the way that you can do it in pre-visualization, in a storyboard, and that's where we come in. And John and I get together and come up with different ideas and throw those at Sam, and that's what we do through the whole movie, is just keep coming up with new ideas and try to throw at him 10 different suggestions on how this action could take place to give him something to pick from.
We had a fixed resource. I know nobody thinks there's a fixed resource here, but it is a fixed resource. An example would be we might have had 800 storyboards for the train sequence, which had to become 150 storyboards, and each of the sequences always are boarded long, and they're always winnowed down. So the picture started very big and started being compressed into its essential storytelling components.
A lot of the decisions about when to do CG, when to do stunts, when to do the real actor were hashed out in storyboard meetings at the start of filming.
There's obvious stuff mostly where there's safety issues or there are inherent risks that they're not going to put actors through, in particular the principals for sure.
What the actor can't do, a stuntman does, and what a stuntman can't do, the CG model does.
There's some stuff that just can't be accomplished any other way. Spider-Man swinging through the city 20 or 30 stories up. There's not really another way to accomplish that.
Hopefully one feathers into the other, blends into the other in ways where you aren't taken out of the picture, in the sense that you still believe it's the same actor going through the motions.
Approached this film, we had a new villain, a very good villain, I think a very challenging villain, and we also had to show our character in the flesh. In the first movie we had masks for both Spider-Man and for the Green Goblin. So their faces or flesh was covered throughout most of the film. We never had to create a CG character with CG flesh.
Because we had to intercut a lot with either a stunt Doc Ock or the real Alfred Molina, our skin and flesh had to hold up to very, very close scrutiny. And it's something that's been very difficult in CG in the past, so we knew that was going to be our biggest challenge.
The amount of light that's striking my face, it's being refracted by my skin, how much comes out the other side and why, is an enormous number of calculations. And there's ways to do that, but it would take months, literally, to render or to represent a single frame of my face with these lights in a computer-generated situation using purely the physics of it. So we, as always in the movies, cheat.
Speed!
We investigated some technology that was done primarily by the Institute of Creative Technology, which is a branch of USC. And we collaborated with them and went and used their device called a light stage, which is set up to capture what happens to skin when it's hit by different light sources.
So there's a light in 275 positions or whatever it is. You actually photograph the skin doing what it does naturally. And what you have is the ability to combine that light from over there and that light from down there and that light from up there and that light from up there to make a light source that comes at me from that side. So what you end up with is a natural looking sense of flesh. What you do is you texture that, essentially project that onto a piece of geometry, which is my face. And I got that by being scanned.
In order to get the proper facial expressions on them, John worked with Tobey Maguire, I worked with Alfred Molina, and we essentially directed them in facial performances of different ranges of emotion with motion capture.
We measured every inch of their body. We cyber scanned every inch of them from head to toe. We did a lot of motion capture on their movements, facial expressions, how they open and close their eyes, how they smile, how they frown. Pretty much all of the range of emotions that we could get. We had them read lines from the script so we could capture performance of how they might say different lines of dialogue.
Those expressions then became blend shapes. The blend shapes, the combination of a smile and a raised eyebrow, are brought together and texture mapped using the flesh that we did in the original photography, laid onto this geometry. And then an artist has to go back in and touch up the place where the eyebrow was lifted too much or one of the cheeks got a little too broad. But you get essentially all of the nuance, all of the subtlety by using components from the actor, and you get the performance by allowing the animators to put together the expressions with the proper timing.
So that every time you see them in a fight sequence, if you stop and you go through slowly, you'll see all these different facial expressions on the characters. And it adds to the believability of that character as opposed to some generic scream, generic frown, generic pain, whatever. Certainly the shot that's probably has to be, the proof in the pudding is the one at the end when they're in the pier and Doc Ock pulls this whole fusion machine down, and this last time we see him, he's full screen. And he's all CG, intending it to look like a real actor. And he drifts away down into blackness, ultimately. And I don't know that we've ever scrutinized an image like that, CG, that close on the screen before.
So this is a wireframe representation of our computer-generated Doc Ock. And what it is in the computer, a definition of what all the surfaces of the character are. And it's created through a number of different layers. And as we're evaluating the shot, we'll look at it in this form because it's a good form for us to see what's working and what isn't working, and where we have detail and where we need detail. And then we'll go to the stage where we look at it in a sort of diffuse view, which is a surface that has very simple shading and very simple lighting on it. and it lets us see details like where wrinkles are and where intersections are, where the cloth might go through his body and where it's working. Once we're satisfied that everything's working in that view, we'll go to a view that's called an ambient occlusion render, and that's what this render is, and it allows us to see lighting and where areas are that will have the light that's in the scene occluded and where it's blocked. And so it allows us to notice where shadowing will occur, and we actually use it in our final rendering and lighting of the character. It's something that's relatively new in computer graphics over the last 2 to 3 years. Here we have 4 different layers to our final composited shot of the actor. So what our artist John Manos has done when he's lit the shot is worked very much like a director of photography would on set, where he's put in special lights from different locations to highlight areas of the face that he wants to bring up or bring down. So in the top left-hand corner, he's got a light from the right that gives good definition to the face and nice shadowing on the left-hand side of his nose, and that's going to be one of the primary sources. On the upper right corner, it's a very, very flat base. It's used for where we need to bring in detail that's in the shadows so everything doesn't go completely clipped out. You can put all the layers together and it helps sell the feel that we're underwater with many different layers and levels of depth. And of course our actor in the end, we get a very good look at his face, and it's the closest actually we see of his face in the whole movie without the glasses.
Hi guys, here's today's daily fact. The biggest Spidey fans have spotted different small details and Easter eggs in Spider-Man Far From Home, such as Peter's birthday marked on his passport as August 10th. Spider-Man's first appearance was in Amazing Fantasy No. 15, released August 10th, but all the way back in 1962. Remember to click here below to subscribe on the side for more great content.